Well, hello, trail friends, and welcome to the first episode of the Peak to Peak podcast. This is actually going to be episode 0, and we have a very special episode 0 for you today. My name is Jaymes. I'm joining you from not sunny Bothell, Washington, which is a small suburb of Seattle, Washington. And you can remember that it's called Bothell because it sounds a lot like pothole. And it's about as remarkable as a pothole as well. I'm joined today by my co-host and co-founder of Second Wind Trail Running. His name is Sean. He's joining us from sunny, beautiful San Diego on this voluptuous Sunday morning. Hello, Sean. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well. So today, we're going to dig into a few things, but the main thing that we want to cover is who we are, why we're doing this podcast, and we want to tell some stories. We want to tell some funny stories about how we got to exactly where we are, and I think we should do that by telling a little bit about ourselves. Sean, who are you?
I'm a guy from, I guess it kind of starts off by I used to live in Arizona. I moved to Bothell, Washington about, I guess I'm not there anymore, but I was living there in the 2000 to 2006 time frame. Been running for a long time. I got a wife, 2 kids. I guess that's the most important part about me. I am a avid competitor. I'm not a super fond of running itself. Which I think there's a combination of those people out there where you're just like you're okay at running, you like to be competitive, but you don't necessarily like the training that is required into becoming more competitive. So that's kind of where I sit on the running spectrum.
I'm 100% sure you're not the only one. And you and I both know that we got into running through cross country originally.
Yep, Meadowdale High School. We had Coach Marv, who we should get on the podcast.
Yeah. So how did we meet exactly? Why don't you tell me your version of the story? Because I have a feeling, based on our personalities, we're going to have a little bit of a different idea of how that story all went down.
Yeah. So I remember it was a sunny day. I remember it was a hot day, which is not, it's in perspective for Bothell, it was probably like 70 degrees. Maybe
that's super hot
on the high. But I remember it was my first day pretty much of running in general. I think it was summer training too. And Coach Bar was having like a summer easy run day. So we're talking maybe 1.5 miles, 2 miles, I think. It might have been a full 5K, but it couldn't have been more than that.
We did the Albertsons run that day. And I want to say that was 3 or 4 miles, something like that.
Okay. Well, regardless, my body's was only at a level in which I ran 1 mile. And not that I couldn't run and not that I couldn't do those things, but I just didn't like doing them. So, because I was physically fit at this point, I was doing competitive athletics outside of running. And I was...
competitive athletics, huh?
Yeah, I did competitive roller skating for about 5 or 6 years. So, but anyhow,
and how many times were you the national champion again?
I was the national champion twice. So I won the Junior Olympic C category, and then it changed to what's called a freshman sophomore B event, and I competed in the freshman or the sophomore A event and took 3rd, I believe. And that 3rd or 4th, and I competed in pairs and precision skating. I competed on the U.S. World Team in Rome in 2005. I qualified for the 2006 and 2007 World Championships as well. Actually, I think I competed on the 2006 World Team, and I was part of the qualification for the 2005 team, something like that. 3 World Teams. I think it was 5, 6, and 7, or 6, 7, 8. I can't really remember, but. Yeah, back to running. I got into running because I had a friend and his name was Steve Riedman, and he was a very competitive runner up at Kamiak, and I really liked him, and he did cross country, so I had run cross country in like 6th grade with my sister, and I was like, yeah, I could do this again, and then showed up that first day, and Coach Marv was like, well, your grades suck, so you can't actually compete, which is actually one of the things that turned around me academically as well, as the ability to compete on the team. And so we went for a run, and I think I started out slow and then worked my way up through the pack. I believe I just was like, I don't want to look like an idiot here. So I started catching up to people, and then I realized I was going faster than I probably should be going. And I met you, and I started just talking to you, and you were like, why is this guy talking to me? And the Albertsons run actually ran right by my house. And so I was like, bro, do you want to get a glass of water? And I could tell that you weren't nearly as tired or as parched as I was, but you were game. You were like, yeah, I want some water, as long as it's on the way. And for me, it wasn't like, hey, let's go grab a water. It was, hey, this is my house. We're done. So
I have a feeling, I don't remember exactly what my motives were, but I want to say there was a combination of, hey, I don't really know anyone. This was my freshman summer, so I hadn't even started high school yet. So I was transitioning from middle school to high school and didn't know anyone on the team really. And so there was this dude talking to me, and I have zero social skills whatsoever. And I was like, oh, someone's talking to me. Maybe they'll be my friend. But I didn't know how to make friends. So I was like, well, whatever he wants to do, I should probably go along with it, because that increases my chance of us ending up friends.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I didn't want to, but I'm sure part of me, based on my brain, was like, nah, I think we should finish this run. I don't think there was any part of my brain that said, we're done here. I think it was like, hey, let's indulge this guy, and then let's get back out on the course and finish it up.
The way I sold it was not, hey, we should stop. The way I sold it was, check out my house. This is who I am. Let's go grab some water real quick, and then we'll be back out there. But once I got home, I was like, oh, I'm done. I'm home. I'm done.
And I'm sure, to me, I was like, well, I have to get back to the school, because that's how I get home from here. So it was never an option in my brain.
Yeah, you weren't home.
That's true. So I think from there we kind of just started being friends. I think we were acquainted with each other.
We weren't friends at first. I latched onto you and said, this is my new buddy. And you were like, could you please stop taking my stuff from me?
Well, yeah. So you had a tendency to borrow things forcefully. Not like bullying, but definitely manipulatively. Well, you're like, no, I'll just bring this back.
Never manipulate.
I'll just borrow this and bring it back. And I was like, I don't know if that's a good idea. And you would just say, yeah, it's a great idea. I'll show you how. And then you just borrow it. Yeah, exactly. But again, the fact that I had little ability to socialize at that time in my life, and to a certain extent still now today, that allowed us to become friends. And over the course of years, we actually grew to tolerate each other, which is great.
Yeah. And I think that the other thing too is that during at the end of my sophomore year, I basically decided that I was going to campaign my junior year to becoming the captain of the cross country team my senior year. And so what that took is that I inevitably had to get better. And so I think that there was a big difference in the way that I trained and how I was competing. And my junior year, I was running like sub 18, which was a varsity letter for Marv's program. And so I lettered.
This is for 5K, year. Of course.
Huh?
This is for 5K, of course.
Yeah,
5K in American high school.
Yeah, 5K, and I know that I started running track and field. I think the end of my sophomore year, Marv was like, you should probably run the 800, the mile, and the mile, or the 2 mile. and I really didn't want to. There's just something about running around the track, but it did well for me. I mean, we had a pretty good bout about that. I know that like my your sophomore, junior year was my senior. Did you letter your junior year?
I have no idea. That's so long ago, man.
Yeah. Well, these are the things that I used as stepping stones to get better, I guess. And my senior year, I was shooting to go to we switched from 3A to 4A, which is like a whole different running category in the state of Washington. And so, whereas I would have been competitively had a shot at going to state my senior year in 3A, there was no way I could make it my senior year. So my senior year, I kind of just got to enjoy running, and it was the first time where I had an entire year of me doing double workouts every day. So I would have cross country practice. I'd do a morning run and had cross country practice during the afternoon, and then I'd go straight to skating practice. So I mean, I was training all the time, and my senior year, I just focused on skating for the most part, and just kept showing up my senior year to practice. So I think that led to me during a time I joined the Navy, and 6 years of doing that. And I kind of got fat for a while. Like I just became like overweight, but not overweight in the sense that other people are, but just like military standard overweight. I was on this cusp of what's called body fat, your BMI, your body mass index. The Navy has like a certain way of tracking that. And I was like within 1 pound of needing to get taped every year. And I don't remember, I was on my I want to say it was the second deployment. And I had this guy that said, he called me 82 tubs once. And I was friends with this guy, and I was like, what did you say to me? He goes, I'm only going to say it once, but someone has to let you know, man, you're letting yourself go. And about that same time, I had a friend named Evan Cortez that he was with a different squadron, but he had been forced to come out to the boat. And so he started me working out. So I started weightlifting actually in the first 3 months of that cruise. And then I got in really great shape. My body fat percentage was probably around 10%, 9%, which is probably the lowest I've ever had. And at the very end of that, in the middle of cruise, we picked up a guy named AT1 Fink, and he's the guy that ultimately introduced me to becoming vegan. And so I picked up those characteristics. I pretty much was on an all plant-based diet, except for when the boat came in with cottage cheese, fresh cottage cheese. I'd eat that because it had casein protein in it, which is a slow release protein, because I was still working out at the time. And then I would eat the tuna that came in with the boat. So outside of that, I was pretty much all plant-based, and I was eating nuts and granola. And he gave me this book, which kind of led to the ultra.
I was going to say, is he the same one who gave you the Scott Jurek book?
So the first book he gave me was Ultra Marathon Man. And when we were in high school, that's when Dean Karnazes was doing all of his stuff. And so I had known that he had done the desert runs and run in Antarctica and those kinds of things. And I remember Alex Whiff, he had been he was the one that like introduced me to Dean Karnazes. And so when he said, this is Dean Karnazes' book, I was like, oh yeah, I remember that guy. And I remember reading this book and seeing there is an elevation profile of the Western states in comparison to the Boston Marathon in there. And I'd never really been interested in running marathons, but when I saw that race profile, I went, oh, this is a real thing. Like, people run in the mountains and cross tens of thousands of feet of elevation for an award at the end of it. And there would happen to be right after that, and you know, if I'm long-winded, please let me know. But you know, we had a half marathon challenge on the boat, and the shirt was cool, and I ran it was.
That's why we all do it, right? We do it for the cool
That's
shirts.
why we do this. Some people do this because they want to feel a sense of accomplishment and feel progression and growth. I do it for the shirts, the medals, and the buckles. Just kidding. But there is an element to wanting to have something, for me, having something that articulates the journey that I went through that can potentially live longer than me. I'm sure that when I'm long gone, my kids will see these belt buckles and they'll see these shirts and these medals and go, can we just throw this crap away, please? And or it might just go in a box and it'll be, oh, this is what your grandfather did, or your great grandfather did. But I like the shirt. I had just finished reading Dean Karnazes' book, and I kind of was like, well, I used to run cross country. How bad could I be? I mean, I'm in the best shape of my life, lifting weights, and so I ran this half. It was on a treadmill. It was in the middle of the Persian Gulf, and it started at midnight. And I ran my first half marathon, and I did that in an hour and a half. I think it was sub 1:30. Obviously, the treadmill does the working for you. I think I jumped off the treadmill, with your feet kind of separated once for about maybe 10, 15 seconds. But there are other people running with me, so I had that accountability of continuing to finish it out. In about
controversy.
What?
Did he actually finish the half marathon? We may never know.
We may never know if I actually
13.1
completed the half marathon.
miles?
But it's what got me to run. I got off the boat. I did that in October, and then in or at maybe the beginning of November, something like that. And then I decided I was going to sign up for the Western States after that half marathon. And
sounds about right to me.
And so I looked at the schedule and I said, okay, I can't sign up for it. I need a qualifier. What's a qualifier in Washington State? And I signed up for Capital Peak 50 miler. And I was like, this is my qualifier. And it was back then you had to run a 50 miler in 12 hours in order to qualify for Western States. And so I just made the decision that that's what I was going to do. And I was like, well, I don't even know if I can run 100 miles, let alone 50, let alone 26. So that year, I had 2 weeks until the Seattle Amica half marathon. And I ran that. And I want to say I ran that in an hour 38. And I was like, man, I'm fast. Like, I thought I was faster than I was. Like, I thought an hour 30 was like pretty doggone good. And then it's like you find out that there are people that can run. My half marathon time was almost like a half an hour more. People were doubling my distance. I would have got lapped for sure, with the 2:02 marathon finishers. And so I ran that. And then about 2 weeks later, I ran the You Can Do It full marathon with my brother, who had not run at all. He was going through aircrew training. We both signed up for this marathon. We get down to the halfway mark. I want to say we got down there in like an hour and a half around that time, maybe a little bit faster. But it took us about 4.5 hours to finish the marathon because I switched to some brand new minimalist shoes from some cushioned shoes, and it was an all-road race. And I messed up. I inflamed my IT band, and so we're kind of hobbling back. And if you don't know Kyle, he's kind of a germaphobe. I think that's the best way to describe him. And he saw this Cliff Bar on the ground, and he just grabs his Cliff Bar, just starts to mount. It was still in the package, but he starts mowing down on this Cliff Bar like a rabid, food deprived dog, man. And I remember I was starving, and I kind of just looked at him, and you could tell he didn't want to share the bar with me, but he was like, do you want a piece of this? And I was like, yeah, I want a piece of that. And so that was kind of my marathon. I, at that point, realized that I had some high in the pie sky goals of trying to run. I'm not trained. I'm not running during this time. I'm lifting weights. That's all I'm doing. I'm not going out and putting in the miles and doing the work and training my body. I'm just going to the gym and working out.
Well, I mean, I think to frame that, at this point, you had read a book and were like, that sounds cool. you hadn't like done research on training plans or what people do or how long you should be training for these things. So
Yeah. Yeah, there's no
there's not a big
connection in my brain.
expectation there to know. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no connection in my brain on the work that needs to be associated. I ran an hour and a half, and I was like half marathon. I go, yeah, I got this. Not a big deal. But running the first marathon that I ran, it was all flat too, and I was like, okay, this is for real. Like I finished in 4.5 hours or something like that. But it was like
And this is
moment
2 weeks
of,
after your first half marathon. Is that what you said? 2 weeks later after your first half marathon?
Yeah, it was either. I think it's the first week of December is the Seattle Amica, and then You Can Do It is the last. It's like the last weekend of December.
So then when did you run your first ultra marathon?
So I took the entire. So IT bands pulled. I go, I'm not going to run another mile until my first 50K. To give myself
That's what most
proper
people do,
amount
yeah.
of rest, which I want to say it was like the first week of February or maybe second week of February.
So about a month.
About a
Okay.
month. Yeah, I took about a month off, and I run the Cedar Woolley 50K, and I take fourth.
And you
by
did
the
well
way,
there.
for men.
I was going to say, yeah.
Fourth for men. But I'm like hobbling through this thing because my IT band is just messed up. And that's when I met John and Lynn Shark and Mike Bloom. And at this point, I have come to the realization that I'm in trouble. I needed to get a 50K under my belt. And I decided that I was going to sign up for this 100-mile race called Badger Mountain Challenge, or the Badger Mountain 100-miler endurance challenge. And I was like, well, if I can run half of this, the 50 miles, then I'll have kind of an accurate assessment on where I'm at and what I need to do to get myself into Capitol Peak and run it in sub 12 and qualify for Western States. So that was kind of where I put those things together. And I was running with John, and he had run Leadville a couple times. And most people know the Sharks. They're just the most awesome survey people, and they just take care of the little birds that fly too far from the nest, I guess. And they help out really good runners too. But I was definitely, they passed me, and I was watching them, and I was like, oh gosh, I got taken by more people because I'm competitive at this point. I was in 4th place, and then I was in 6th place, and these thoughts were running through my head as I'm like hobbling through with a broken IT band and or an inflamed IT band, and then they stopped running. And that was my first introduction to interval running, where they would run for 4 minutes and they'd walk for a minute. And this also was like they had just done, I want to say they did like a full marathon or a 50K with some serious gain the day before. And they were running a second, 50K the next day. So they were actually training for things. And they picked me up. I basically saw them stop, and I went, "Oh, I could run for a little bit. I just can't run for long periods of time because I couldn't handle the amount of discomfort in my knee from the IT band." So I was like, "Hey, would you guys mind if I ran with you?" And just in Sean Skate's fashion, I started talking to him, and I kind of articulated the story that I am right now to John, and he basically was like, "Hold up, you're gonna go from half marathon to 100-miler in 3 months?" And I was like, yeah, that makes sense. He's like, that is the craziest thing. And he's like, bro, you stick with me and I'll make sure you finish and get a buckle. And that's kind of where that friendship was formed. And he was like, what's your training schedule look like? And I was like, oh, I don't. So I started talking about my workout, like my lifting schedule. And he's like, no, like you're running training. And I was like, oh, I'm not running.
I think all great achievements have a level of ignorance associated with them. Everyone who sets out to do something great really has no idea what they're trying to do when they do it. And they say, I'm just going to do this and we'll see how it goes. Yeah.
And so he kind of was like, he had these mandatory things that I had to do. They weren't like, you have to do these things. It was more like, bro, if you're going to actually finish, you need to do X, Y, and Z. And one of them was I had to run Chuck-a-Nut, but I had to take 8 hours to run Chuck-a-Nut. Because he's like, you have never been on your feet longer than,
Yeah, the goal wasn't to finish quickly. It was to have time on feet.
Yeah,
it wasn't about the race performance.
Which I did. I think I finished. I want to say I finished like 8 hours 10 minutes, 8 hours 16 minutes, something like that. I was out there the whole time. And the other thing too is that he would schedule these weekend training runs, and it was highly recommended that I get to them. And they had some gain in them, and I was getting rocked, man. I remember just being like, oh my God, how am I supposed to? And that's how I learned how to walk uphill. It's how I learned to use trekking poles. It's funny because the first 3 or 4 times I used the trekking poles, I had collapsible ones. And then the last part of these collapsible ones, you're supposed to pull the handle up, and that locks everything into place. The first like 5-6 times I used them, I did not do that. So I was like, these things are garbage. They're always falling apart, and they don't work well. And so then I ran Badger Mountain. No, I ran Chuck-a-Nut, and I took 8 hours to basically do that. And then I think 2 weeks later was Badger, man. And that was my first 100. So I went from 50K to 100. And I think it has 14 or 16,000 feet of gain. It's not an incredibly difficult race. It's a lollipop. It had this house. It's different now. I think it's a 2-loop 50 miler, but at the time it had this. It had a house at the end at the turnaround where they had like an actual toilet you could use and like sink. Someone like donated their like, I want to say it was like a 28 or 3,000 square foot home. Opened up the garage, set up some picnic tables. They had pizza laid out, and at this point, I'm still doing a vegan based diet. But they had pizza there, like cheese pizza. And I'm just mowing down on this pizza because I'm just dying out there. I remember I took the early start, so I'd have an additional hour to do the race. So there's a 32-hour cutoff for that race, and we had 33 hours. I finished in 31:45, so I still would have made the cutoff, but Lynn finished I think in 31:59. It's like
that's impressive.
It's pretty impressive, but we were also like an hour ahead. We had an extra. I was looking through this because I wanted to do the story right, and I realized that in my mind, when I kept talking to John Shark, set up a crew, and Debbie Kuwasaka was in that, and we picked up Debbie at like mile 50, and it was a mile 50. We had a guy named Mike Bloom running with us, who's a great guy too, who I've been training with. And he basically rolled his ankle 3 times in 3 separate different ways. He's a U.S. Army Ranger. So he was just like, I'm finishing this. I don't care what anybody says. And what happened was there was so much swelling in his ankle that the tendon, was connected to I don't know the entirety of the story, but this is the way I remember it going down, is that there's so much pressure and so much swelling in his foot that the tendon basically couldn't hold on to it, and it ripped a small shard of his bone off. And
sounds miserable.
It was, I mean, I saw him spraying it at least once. I'm like, oh God, he's done. And he just kept running. And that was like mile 10. So mile 50, we lost him. We lost John, and I picked up Debbie. And by all intents and purposes, I didn't think Debbie liked me at all. Which if you get to know Debbie, she's just like the most straightforward, honest human being I've ever met. But she's got like this, like, I also was the jerk that thought he was going to run a 100-miler with 0 training. There was a good chance that at anybody that's towed that line, I was the guy that wasn't going to make it. And so we start running, and we went to a pre-race brief that John put on a couple weeks before that, and they kept saying, hey, make sure you bring your baby wipes. We went through like a must-haves on the course, and he kept saying, And if you run out of baby wipes, don't worry about it. We're going to have extras. So in my mind, and like he basically, like the way it was framed to me, it was that I didn't need to bring my own baby wipes. So I didn't. And we get like 75, 80 miles into it. No, maybe 68, somewhere in that range. And I'm like, oh, I gotta go to the bathroom. And it occurred to me for the first time, where do I go to the bathroom? And then how do I clean up my mess? And so I picked up this like, and she's, I would say is like, she's a Boston qualifier runner. So I turn to this like elite based runner and I go, hey, like a gal I know 2 days. I knew her from the day before I met her for the first time, and now running with her, I go, hey, where am I supposed to go poop?
Yeah.
And like, I have no idea what I'm doing out there, right? And so she's like, oh, well, you clean up with baby wipes. I go, well, John said he would provide them. So now she has to like give me some of her, and I'm like, I'm doing everything wrong, man. I feel terrible looking back on it. Like, I wish I had spent the time to learn, but yeah.
Well, that's probably what created her disposition towards you in the beginning.
Yeah.
She probably had that experience. It was like, okay, this is how this is going to go with this guy.
Yeah.
Got
it. I run, we get to like a mile. So in the time between that point and the end of the race, Debbie and I have become like, I would say good friends. Like we've sung Journey together. We've shared gels. She's given me some of her water, all these things. And we get to like mile 80. And this whole time I'm struggling, but I know I have more in the tank, and we're riding these cutoffs really close. And so we get to like mile 80 and we're walking, and I'm walking with her, and I go, hey, are we still good? And she basically the whole time up until this point, she's like, yep, we're still good. We're still on track. Everything's going great. And she turns to me and she goes, no, if you don't go now, you're not going to make it anymore. And Lynn was a little bit behind us. So I'm like laying down on the ground asking this question. And she's like, no, if you don't go, you're done. And so I get up and I'm like, mindset changes. I'm all out. I'm sprinting. I'm running through the valleys and up the mountains. And to be honest, I probably switched from like a 16-minute mile pace to like a 13-minute mile pace. But in my brain, I was all out. I was running sub-6. I've never run this fast. In track, I could run a sub-5 hour marathon. Today, I was running a 3-hour marathon or a 3-hour mile. Like that's the gear in which my brain shifted. Yeah, I wasn't running that fast, but I want to say the last 2 miles, you can pick up a pacer. You can have a pacer the whole race, but there's like a point in which I picked up Savannah for like the last 2 miles. And so I got to run the last 2 miles in, and I just, I got to the end, and you saw that clock said 31:45. And technically we had an extra hour, but the clock that I had, actually, I think the clock said 30:45, but technically I think I had been out there for 31 hours and 45 minutes. So I finished that race and I was destroyed. I like my body went into shock. I was just sweating for like 3 days. And then I said, I got a buckle, and I was like, I think I've done what I set out here to do. And then about a month later, I ran Capitol Peak 50 miler. And I was still struggling with a lot of different injuries that I accumulated from Badger. And so I think I ran that in like 13 hours and some change, but not Western States qualification. And so I took that as an opportunity to kind of shift my mindset, and I started training, not like a normal person that runs 100-mile ultra marathons, but someone that runs, marathons, I would say. They're not like an avid marathon runner, but someone that runs marathons occasionally.
So you're training probably 4 or 5 days a week.
Yeah, 4 or 5 days a week I was running, and I was probably putting in about I'd say I was doing maybe 50, 60 miles a week, but I was doing like 30 miles on Saturday and 10 to 14 on Sunday. And then I was doing 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 miles on weekdays, usually taking Mondays off from the double run and taking Fridays off before the 2 run. But I ended up doing Pine to Palm that year. I think that was the year I did Pine to Palm, and I ran that in 25 hours, 26 hours, something like that. I took a 2-hour nap in the middle of the race, which was great. I came in, John was on Wasatch time. I wasn't really keeping up on my nutrition, and there's some other stuff that was going on in that capacity, but I ended up running that in like, I probably could have run it sub 24 if I had known where I was at and I had paced myself a little bit better. But, a 5-hour PR off of my race for sure in just a matter of 6 months from training. And then I qualified for Western States, and that's kind of was the goal. And I never have gotten in, but I've run qualifiers and I've put my hat in a bunch of times. But I hear that's kind of just how the story goes,
Absolutely. So what year was this that you ran Pine to Palm?
I want to say I got out of the Navy in 2013. So I want to say that was 2013 that I ran Pine to Palm. 2013, 2014. I took it, I stopped running almost in its entirety after that. Like I hit up a couple races here and there, but not, I think in my mind I was like, oh, I'm going to get into Western States and everything's going to be kosher. And then I didn't get in, and I was like, and then people started telling me like, you're not ever going to get into the Western States. Like people just don't, you have to qualify. And at that point, I think that was 2014 is the year that I didn't get into Western States. I ran some other races. I reran Cedro Woolley 50K. And I think I took second that year in that race. And then I ran some other races here and there. I want to say, I don't think I ran another 100 miler that next year. And then 2015, I think I ran Cascade Crest 100, but I hadn't run from the point in which I stopped running to Cascade Crest. I just happened to get in, and because that's a lottery-based system too, and it's easier to get into Cascade Crest, I think, but it's still like there's a good chance you might not get in. But I did a lot of volunteering during that time, and I really enjoyed actually just helping out at aid stations. And I think the next year I spent more time helping out at races than I did actually running them. I ran a fat 100K. Baker Lake 100K. It was just one year that they did that, and they had a buckle. And Terry Sentinella is the race director for that series, and we became friends through John Shark. And I started helping out at some of his races, and I kind of was like, hey, what would it take for me to be a race director? And he kind of let me shadow him for a while on some of his races that he put on, Baker Lake being one of them. And I got to see how aid stations were put together. And I just kind of started putting myself into that fold. And then in 2015, I ran Cascade Crest. I want to say it's 2015 I ran Cascade Crest. Or maybe it was 2014. But then I just stopped. I got into Angeles Crest, actually. I got into Angeles Crest in 2017 or 2000. I was still trying to get in these races. I ran Badger 50 miler one of those years because it was going to be 100 miler, but then I ran it. I hadn't been training. I kind of would bump races to keep me at least relatively in shape to do these races and compete, but I just or just to keep Western States qualifiers up or Hard Rock. I was interested in running the Hard Rock too, but I also did not get into that race. And I've applied to Leadville every year. I haven't gotten to that one. But the whole point I was making there was it's like, I think from 2015, I maybe ran, or 2016, maybe ran one race at all until Bandera.
Yeah. So that's an extensive recap. I mean, I feel like you have been running throughout that time, but The funny thing that stands out to me about that is that you can go into such great detail about all these things, and it's not just about your experiences. It's about you interacting with other people. You know, like their times, you know who they are, you know what races they've run in the past. And there's a lot of detail in there, and your brain just gravitates towards those things. And I'm listening to these stories and I'm thinking like, well, now I feel like I kind of have to tell about my introduction into running and into ultra marathons. And the central theme of it, of course, is that a lot of my exposure to it has been through you, and that has piqued my interest. But I don't know who any of these people are. Like I've grown to know them through the stories that you've told, and they are like interesting stories. And that's I think part of how you learn is by going through things and failing and making mistakes and just like trying things. And that's what creates these stories for you. And so now I'm thinking to myself like, well, how would I describe my first ultra marathon? And I'm like, yeah, I bonked a little bit, but for the most part, it was a pretty flawless race. Like I didn't really have too much issue with it. It was,
that's because
for
you were
me,
training.
Well, yeah, that's the part.
You're putting in the work.
That story. Yeah. It wasn't too long ago. I think it was 2018, maybe. I don't remember. It was recently. It was very recently. It was the Y East Howe 50K. And when I made the decision to run it,
I think let's set the stage here. And that is your first marathon. And I think that becomes where we both actually came back together. Friendship was being reformed because we had split. You joined the Marine Corps, and then you came back.
I did that.
And then you met a girl who subsequently is the sister of the woman that I married.
That's true. It's a funny way that you would describe my wife. That's interesting.
Well, Sierra and Savannah are sisters.
They are.
And so we were I'd say best friends in high school that ended up marrying into the same family. Like it's a pretty crazy set of circumstances that led to that. But
it is.
The thing
it
that
is,
I would
and the problem is that you have like a 5-year head start on that. So when I had to enter into that agreement, it wasn't really up to you whether or not it would happen. It was like, should I push this? Is this an acceptable thing to do socially? And you're just going to have to live with it, kind of. I mean, at the time, you were all for it. You were a little cautious of my intentions with it, but...
Well, I think there are some foundational things that you changed relative to the relationship and experiences that you had that really defined a set of morals and values that I have grown to appreciate from you and who you are. I think that they ran actually in line with who you are as a person anyhow, but just kind of, with as far as like faith-based stuff. And
yeah, so I forced my wife to run a marathon. It was the Seattle Rock and Roll 2014. I remember very vividly because I have the shirt that I look at all the time, and it's the only marathon. That was my first marathon that I had run. I've run 2 marathons, and I've never run one for a personal best. That time I was running it with the intention to pace my friend, who then became my girlfriend shortly thereafter, and then shortly thereafter became my wife. And she was going from scratch to running a marathon, similar to how Sean did, except when I laid out the commandments of that agreement, I said, we're going to train 6 days a week. We're going to train for 6 months. You cannot take days off unless they are on the schedule. You will show up. You will be on time. And we will run this marathon 6 months from now, and you will finish it, and we will have no problems. And she somehow agreed to that. That doesn't sound like a very nice thing to agree to, but I think that she had some interest in running, but also in me. And so that's how we embarked on that journey. And we did exactly that. She was a trooper. She ran through some pain. I had never run a marathon either up to that point, like we mentioned. I had only run, 5Ks in high school, but I figured I had the parameters of a training block and what that was supposed to look like. And when I set up the training schedule, I loosely based it on, having like a speed day and then like a long day on the weekends and some easy days in between. So it wasn't like too much of a stretch, and it was very similar to how you'd actually train for a marathon, retrospectively. But
one quick thing I'll throw in here too is that my wife, who had been watching me run these long distances, ran a marathon, I think 6 months before Sierra did. And the funny thing too is that my wife had run that race, and then her whole, like not her whole family, but several members of her family, like, I can't believe you ran a marathon. And her response to it was, it's just like, it's just a marathon, guys. Because she had seen the other
side. And even
side.
though that was her first marathon, she had seen what you were doing and was like, this is not that big of a deal. Yeah. So anyway, we finished that. I want to say we finished it in just under 5 hours. And I was like, oh, yeah, running's cool. Let's do that. And my wife, who is not my wife yet, was, I think, injured throughout the process. I think we probably pushed it a little bit too hard. I don't remember the mileage that we got up to in that training block, but it was probably too fast of a ramp up for her. But she stuck it out and she finished it. And then we romantically developed, but as far as running goes, we pretty much fell off a cliff. I took time off from running because I had no like goals. I think it was the thing that was stopping me from running. I was enjoying it, but I wasn't actively training for anything. So I kind of let it fall to the wayside. And then years later, I want to say it was about 3 years later, I was interested in getting back into running, and I had a friend named Sean, who you might know very intimately now, who said he and his dad were thinking about running the San Diego Rock and Roll. And I was like, oh, cool, another marathon. This sounds fun. It'll be like a little adventure. We'll fly down to San Diego. He had just moved there at that point, and he was like, yeah, but I'm having trouble convincing my dad. But if you and I were both running it, we could definitely get him to like commit to it.
If we're being fair, I think I used it as a ploy to get you out there. And I think I did the same thing to my dad. I'm not saying that I did do that, but for the record, I think the idea
Which means
of
that you
us
absolutely
all three
did.
running together is what sold me, you, and my dad doing it. Especially because at that point, I think Kyle had cancer, and so I was running for Cancer Research and St. Jude.
Yeah, Kyle being your brother. And so I mean, I think for all of us, it was kind of like, oh, we're all going to do this together. It's an adventure. And so, like I said, this is like my second marathon. But again, it wasn't for like a personal record. It was like to do this and have this experience. And we all signed up about 6 weeks out. And I'm pretty sure your dad had the most training at that point. He had been running almost exclusively on a treadmill. I think maybe exclusively on a treadmill.
It wasn't exclusive to the treadmill. He would do probably. He had like a 2-3 mile route that he would run down his road up this monster hill in Mukilteo and then back down. And then that was his route. And then he would also run on the treadmill.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah, because I do know where he was living at the time was at the very, very bottom of the shoreline. And then to get anywhere more than a mile away, it was like you had to go straight up it was a giant hill. But anyway, so he had the most training under his belt at that point. And I was like, yeah, I could put together something in about 6 weeks. I could probably get up to like 30 or 40 miles a week. And we'll all just run this together because we're going to be running at a really slow pace. Like, it's not important. And I think you maybe did some training for that?
No.
Okay. Yeah, you just showed up on race day.
I think the 2 weeks before, I just ran a half marathon just to make sure that everything was clicking together fine.
Sure, yeah, that sounds about right for you. So we all set off, and my intention for this whole thing was like, let's do this together. It's going to be an adventure. So I was brushed off a few times, like, go on ahead. Like, you're obviously faster. And I was like, no, like, why, that's not the point of this. This is to have fun and like hang out together. And if I run off ahead, then we're not together anymore. But around the half marathon point of that race, I think your dad was having some hamstring issues. He has like a surgery of some kind. Yeah. I think they took something from like a tendon or a hamstring or something like that. And so you guys both kind of stopped and you were like, I'll stick with my dad. Like, clearly you're not having fun anymore. Like, why don't you just go on ahead? And I set off on that one to try to finish as fast as possible with the intention of like running at the pace that I thought we were going to be running at for the remainder of the race, which we had slowed way down from because of the injury. And I definitely bonked on that race right towards the end. There's like a big hill going south on, I think the 805. And yeah, you're coming right through Balboa, and then you got this big downhill, and I'm like, all right, if I can just get to the top of this hill.
Where you're running on the 163.
You're running the 163. Okay. Whatever that road is that goes right in between. Back into the city, through Balboa Park, right down the middle. And I got to the top of the hill, and I was like, great, we made it. Now we just can cruise down this thing. And then I start heading downhill, and all of a sudden my fingers and my toes are getting tingly. And like I'm having trouble like staying stable. My vision is going a little bit blurry, and I'm like, I can't stand up straight. I'm like, oh, okay, this is not going to go the way I thought it was. So I got within, I think I found an aid station, got like 2 gels in, and tried to drink as much water as I could, and then got down to the bottom, pulled into the city, and was maybe a 1/10 of a mile from the finish line. You come around a city block, and it's a straight shot to the finish line, which I think is probably 4 or 5 blocks away. And there's a guy in a yellow like event coordination shirt, and he's got both of his arms out to the sides, and he's like, hey, no runners past this point. You know, the course is closed. And I'm like, I ran 42.1 kilometers, 26.1 miles, whatever that is, and you're not going to let me finish? Like, what? I'm dying, man. Like, I need a banana or something, because I had gotten just enough food in me to get to the finish line.
Yeah.
And so we have like hundreds of runners accumulating at this point. And we hear through like the radio something about an active shooter in a garage nearby. And I don't have my phone on me. I have my Apple Watch at the time, which I was using to record my race, but I didn't have like 3G or LTE communication on it. I left my phone in the car, and I'm in San Diego, and my ride home is Sean and his dad. And so I have no way to communicate with them, and I know they're way back there. So I'm like, maybe they'll run by. Like, they have to go by me at some point, or maybe they'll all collect in the same point. And so we did some shuffling for about a half an hour. They made us back up like 2 or 3 city blocks. We were back on the corner of Balboa. I was sitting in the grass, and I ended up asking a lady who had a phone, who was also stopped because she was a runner, if I could call one of them. I don't remember if we got in contact or not.
No, we didn't.
No,
it's funny.
I called
too,
my wife.
We were going when we were going up that beast of a hill.
Yeah.
The people were basically telling us to just go ahead and stop and go ahead and walk, because the race was the end was canceled. So we're kind of like just kind of shuffling along, and I normally walk up hills anyhow. So I was like, this is great. I'm cool with this. And they're like, oh, the race is finished. And my dad, he's never run a marathon. This is his first marathon. And he was like, no, I'm finishing, and he looked at me and he said, let's just run it into the very last spot, and we'll call it a win at that spot, and so this is a guy that had been struggling with this injury almost the whole time, and he was just pushing through, and we kind of get there, and like we get a call from, I think it was Sierra, and she's like, yeah, where's Jaymes? And I was like, he went on without us. And she's like, what do you mean on without you? And I was like a half an hour ahead of us. And she's like, there's I think we were calling in to see if they had talked to Jaymes. I stirred the pot, because I was like, what's going on here? Where's Jaymes? Do we know where Jaymes is at? And so I'm running down. I was like, I killed my friend. I killed my friend. I was sure you were fine, but it was like the moment we were like just trying to figure out where everybody's at. And but yeah, I remember you're like, I think we crossed the finish line before you, didn't we?
No. So I think you guys crossed
within a minute
like
or something.
4 minutes after me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But at
You had
that
done
point
all
it was
this
like
work.
4.5 hours. Yeah. And I had sat at the finish line waiting to cross for like an hour and a half. And then they finally reopened it and you guys came cruising through. And I realized, like, after we had all gotten back together and found each other, I found you guys, like, in the finishing area, like, sitting on a hill or something. Or you found me or whatever it was.
Yeah, we ran into each other, I think.
Yeah, whatever. We finished out the day and we all got a ride home together. And it was all great. But we looked at the finishing times, like, because I hadn't crossed the finish line. I just sat there for an hour and a half before I finally got to cross. And you guys were, like, 4 minutes behind me or, like, 2 minutes ahead of me or whatever it was. And it was like, I can't believe I did all that work to get way back up there. And then you guys just waltzed in. Like, obviously it didn't matter to me that much. Like, the whole thing was like the experience of going out with you guys and having a fun time. But at the same time, my secondary goal, and as soon as I split from you guys, my goal was let's get as big of a PR as we can. Because at the time, my PR, my official technical PR, was just under 5 hours, which is the marathon that I had done with
Which
Sierra.
you still got.
Which I did, yeah. I got like a 4:26 or something like that.
Yeah.
So technically I PR'd, but nowhere near what my actual capability was. So,
well, I mean, we'll never know.
Yeah. So from there, I wanted to build fitness and I wanted to keep doing running. I just had no idea what I wanted to do as far as goals. And that's when like the ultra running thing started to become a realistic possibility. I was like, marathon, I could run ultras. I like running on trails way better anyway. So I think I had signed up for the Y East Howell 50K, and I was like, Sean was like, yeah, you could probably do like a 50 miler, 100K, like just do whatever you feel like doing. Like, what's an interesting race to you? And I was like, I'm going to start with the smallest ultra marathon you can technically do and work up from there. And I have no like,
well, I would say that
audacious goals.
So I hear you. And I'll just say for the record too, like I really have an admiration for how you plan things out and you have these goals and you set things out. My intention there was not to, when I ran my first 100 miler, it was like Pine to Palm. I ran Pine to Palm, which I'll say was probably my first 100 miler, where I ran for Sean. I had such an accomplished feeling at the end of that it's like, that's something that I wanted to share, for not necessarily to share with you, but for you to actually get on your own. So for me, I was like, there's no reason to slow ball this. You train way more than I do. You have this thing figured out. And part of the reason that you are successful in the running capacity that you are is the way that you do things. But for me, you said, well, let's see if I could do. You kept saying, let's see if I could do a 50K and let's see how that goes. And in my mind, I'm like, you're gonna be just fine.
Right, yeah. And I think we've figured out now, after dissecting this a lot, and not just this instance, but kind of training and setting goals in general, is when I say, let's see if I can do it. What I mean is, let's see if I can do it to the best of my ability. Let's see just how good I can do it, over a certain amount of time. And when you say, let's see if we can do it, it literally means, can I accomplish this at the bare minimum? Is it achievable technically? Right.
Yeah.
So for me, when I committed to running my first 50K, it was like an 18-month project or something where I decided I'm going to do this. We need to train to get to a level where I'm going to perform well at this, because I want to see like ballpark what my capability is. And I'm not just going to go into it hoping to walk it in. Right. So I did that. I didn't have the best race. I definitely underfueled throughout it, but it was a great race.
I was supposed to run with you.
You were. You did. You signed up for it. Yeah, you paid for it, and you never came.
I didn't come because there was a conflict in an event that we had to go to. So,
yeah, you had outside pressure, and I also know that at this time your wife was not super enthusiastic about the time you were spending away from your family because you were interested in ultra running, because you just had a baby, right?
Okay. In her defense, the amount of time that I was spending away was not a qualification of me actually being interested in something. So it was more like, you're spending X amount of time, but I know you're not actually working that hard at what you're doing. Like you're not dedicated. You're not acting in a mindset that I know when I see. Because when I do things, not to toot my horn, if I actually decide that I'm going to do something and I give it a ton of effort, it usually works out really well. And so she was seeing me in this capacity where she goes, "You're not actually trying that hard." And I'm like, "Yeah, you're right." And she's like, "So you're spending this time away from our family and you're not going to try that hard?" And I'm like,
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, but that's fair. Yeah. So she felt that the time invested in it wasn't worth the outcome. And I'm not trying to make her sound like the bad guy here. She values you a lot. And so she wanted you to be around the family. And like you said, yeah, the effort level you were putting into it for the return you were getting wasn't worth it for her. And she was trying to communicate that to you. So you missed out on that race. And at the time, I think I gave myself 6 weeks or something. And then I was signed up for another race.
Another 50K.
I want to say something like that. Or maybe it was another 50K, yeah. No, it was in September. So it was a July to September. So I was taking like 2 weeks off. I had like a 6-week training block and then another 2-week taper. And then I was ready for the second one. And I think I did that because I knew I was going to make mistakes. And so my goal was to take what I had learned in the first one, kind of revamp and use the training I already had under my belt to go into the second one and do it better, which is exactly what I did. Like I had I think a little bit of an injury that was kind of bothering me, but I could still run through no problem. And I think the big issues that I had with that race were all nutrition and water and a little bit of pacing, but not really pacing. And so it was the Backcountry Rise, which is another 50K in the Mount St. Helens area. Mount St. Helens? Yeah, Mount St. Helens area, which is a really cool race. And I think a lot of the inspiration for kind of how I'm trying to put these races on that we're doing, because the night before you come at like 5 p.m., everybody camps in the parking lot and you go in for like a spaghetti dinner. They had like some videos playing. They have like the Y East Wolfpack is a sponsor for that race. And they're like a running company out of the Portland area. And it was like a really cool, inclusive time. And I knew I was going there by myself and, taking no family because I was sleeping in the back of our 2002 Ford Escape. So I didn't intend to bring anyone with me. I slept next to a cooler that I spooned with. And it was like, go try to make some friends or something, but really it's just about the experience. And that's an incredible race. Like the views are out of this world. You're running like right up next to the crater of Mount St. Helens. You can see right into it. And so I finished that. I learned a lot more about me and about running. And I knew from there that I wanted to ramp up the distance a little bit more. My intention was to take probably like a 5-year span to go from the 50K to the 100-mile distance, because I've heard and kind of appreciate the advice that you shouldn't blow through all the distances. You should kind of appreciate each one as you graduate to it, because it's not really about getting to the end goal. It's about enjoying the process of learning each new distance as you tackle it. And so my next race, of course, after that was to sign up for Bandera 100K, completely blow through the 50-mile thing and do it, was it like 6 months after the 50K? I think at that point I was just itching. I had a taste of ultras and was like, let's just do an ultra. These are epic experiences. I know I'm capable of a lot more, and I just want to be in that environment. I really love the people. I love how this environment works. I love the camaraderie and hearing stories and talking with people. The first 50K that I did, the Why Used How, I had met like 2 or 3 people, and we all basically ran most of the race together. And we were all from different places, all got to know each other. And it was like a really cool experience to just run with complete strangers. And by the end of it, I feel like they were people that I needed to stay connected with in some capacity. So, of course, we're all like Strava friends now and everything. But so I set my goal to increase my mileage. I think at that point I was running about 50 miles a week, 80K a week, and trying to push up into like 100K a week, 110, 120. And I think I got there a little bit, but for the most part, stayed around that 80K, just nursing some injuries, trying not to push it too hard. And I finally convinced you around November of last year to sign up for it, and we just wing it. And I was like, great, that gives you like 3 months to train. You'll get everything like back into shape. We'll have a good time out there. It'll be an adventure, right? Like this is what I'm always pursuing with these races. I'm always pursuing like the adventure, the experience, trying to go out and create something that's truly unique and doesn't follow the mundane pattern of the everyday life, which I think is kind of how we ended up in this.
Well, there's
this story.
There's a little bit of a jump there too. Is that after you finished your second 50K, there was an idea that I had maybe 2 years back, and that was to start my own race company and put on my own races. And I had this vision for a race, a race adventure experience. Take all the good things that I've seen in lots of great races from great race directors, and then also add our own like high caliber variable to it, at least as the best that you can do with those races. And I think it was after your second race, you were like, could we actually make this, you said, was this a fluke idea of yours, or would you actually be serious and to spend the time and the effort and the energy to make this a real thing? And I think that we came up with the idea that we would poke the bear, and we would see if we could even how the whole race thing fleshed out, and we basically went to town interviewing, sitting down with people like a Scott Mills in a BJ and a Dan Page over at the Uhari 100, and BJ of San Diego 100, Scott Mills of Surf, and
Roger. What's Roger's last name?
Roger McHale. He used to own Evergreen Trail Running, which is now owned by someone else. But we were at the Evergreen State Fair when I feel like that was the conversation that clicked, where he basically laid out the simplicity around the ultra community, and he's like, it's low risk, it's high reward. You're gonna work your butt off, but it'll all be worth it. The races are profitable, and to be honest, we were like. This is the community of people that we want to serve on anyhow, and you're telling us we can make money at the same time, and he was a dude that I would say that just took care of people really well. So he's kind of the idea of like, he's like, you can make money as long as you're giving people a high quality product and you put them first, and it's like, I've heard the adage is that the accumulation of wealth is directly proportional on the amount of people you can serve on. And so the more people we can serve on, the better. And I think that it was that conversation where we basically said, let's start a company. And then we went, where are we going to put our first race?
Yeah, because at the time you were in San Diego and I was still in Washington. And still in Washington.
The first part was going to be a hybrid. We were going to do some races in Washington and then some races in the Southern
California. Was your idea.
Yeah, because the original idea that I had is that we could have some races in Washington, because that's where I came from. That's where my I would say, that's where all my friends that I've built, like you've built some friends. I've built most of my friendships in running down there initially, or up there initially. So it was like, okay, I could put on a race and we'll have at least 10 runners. Because you can convince your friends to come out for it. Yeah. And
Yeah,
so
but we both love the area. We both love the trails out there. We know them really well. And so
they're
it
what
was
we grew
like
up on.
we have a good infrastructure that we can build on here. But you were down in San Diego and we were looking at the two markets and we decided like there's a lot of opportunity in San Diego
That there isn't
to
in Seattle.
to tap into trails that people don't necessarily know about or use. And we kind of lucked into our first race
Yeah, that's true.
in that
And
exact
the other thing I'll
way.
throw out too is anytime that we decided we were going to put on a race, we have a QA system that we go through. We make sure that nobody else in our area is putting on a race in that area, right? And so it's like we've been really, really cautious to try and put on a race that we can research. That I'm sure that the ranch happened during a day that someone else's race was happening, but we tried to make sure that it wasn't someone who we directly affected and took business away from, and in those capacities. Like we weren't. I know that there was a race the next day that was put on, but it was for a whole different genre of runner. I mean, I think we both shared one distance, which is the half marathon, but we really try to put on races in like that don't take away from the community. And when I was trying to figure out how to put a race on in Washington, it was like every weekend there's a race in our community, in that group, and anything that we tried to do, because we had the way back home. Is that what home sweet home? Back home.
Home sweet home 50K. I think it was going to be a 55K because I couldn't get it down to a 50K.
And it was just a struggle to try and find out. One, there's another race that runs in that area, not in that exact area, but in a similar area to the course that we're trying to put on. And they're a brand new running company, so we didn't want to take away from their startup, really. And then on the second end, it was like, what weekend are you going to put it on? Because every weekend's taken. And so down here in the Southern California area, we were able to find just a healthier balance. There's a ton of stuff going on, but we can sneak a race in here or there and it won't affect the community of runners and the race directors that work really, really hard to put on great events for other for runners.
Yeah. So Second Wind Trail Running in its core is about building up the community. It's about like making sure that the race product that we put out is not just thrown together, because we both value how people come together at this type of experience. And so tell me a little bit about kind of what our philosophy is, what it is that we try to do that might set us apart from other races in the area.
Yeah, well, I would say that we're not a better. To say the word better is not the right word, but
superior.
I would say that what we're trying to do is so in the Southern California area, there's these incredible races that have this long history of just producing great races for people. And we saw an element to, I'd say, Second Wind has an element to it that is where we saw these extra little things that just make an event go from good to great. And the whole idea behind what we're doing is we're trying to serve on the community. We're giving trail work opportunities to facilitate trail work requirements for other races. We're also we're serving at every race. In the last year, I've helped. I've given time at Cuyamaca. Me and my daughter both. We've given time at Cuyamaca. We've given time at the Turkey Burner. We've given time at ABC 50. We've given time at I ran San Diego 100 miler and I got 49 miles into it. And I'll talk about that too, because I think that was a huge aspect to. That was in June of the. Actually, that's a sidestep that I like to. When I ran San Diego 100 miler, I was running with John and Lynn again because they came down to run it, and I decided just on a whim that I was going to do that. And that was kind of my intro back into running. And I forgot about that, but I ran this race and I just saw this incredible community of people in the San Diego area coming together, serving. I was done at like mile 38, and these group of people, I forget what the aid station is, but they basically brought me back to life. It was probably mile 40, actually, mile 40, 42, somewhere in that range. I just saw this group of people like, no, you got this, man. Because I was riding the no running, by the way, no training for this, but I kind of just jumped into it and did it. And I got to the end of it, and I was like, these are the people that I forgot. These people, I forgot that these are the people that I like, the people I'm that move me to be better. And I got cut at mile 48, and we came in and we were screaming in, and we came in at 2 minutes after cutoff, and they pulled us, and rightfully so. I mean, that's the other thing you got to remember too, in any kind of race that we're gonna do, in any kind of race that's out there, is those aid station captains got to make hard calls, and that and if an aid station, like for me, is if I have an aid station captain that says a certain thing, I'm gonna back that aid station captain. Doesn't matter who he said it to or what was done. That's the way it goes, and you got to respect the volunteers, because if you don't respect your volunteers, you don't have volunteers.
Yeah, I don't think anyone in a position to make a call to end a racer's day wants to make that call, but at the end of the day, it's about safety, and it's about making sure that everyone has a good experience, that no one's left out there, that we're not endangering anyone. It's an endurance sport. It's an extreme sport for sure.
Yeah.
Like, people think that people who run ultra marathons are pretty crazy, but we want to do it in the safest way possible. And so to end someone's day is never an exciting decision, but it's something that has to happen to make sure that race goes the way that it needs to continue to exist. Yeah.
And I think that the only reason I was bringing that up is that I came out of that race going, what an awesome race. This is something I want to do. I want to do events like this. And so San Diego 100, hats off to BJ and Angela and Scott Mills and the other people that have put on that organization. It's like, it's the whole reason where I was when we came together with the idea after you finished your first 50K, or your second 50K, I'm sorry, and you came up with this idea. I had just had this incredible exposure back into the community, and that's ultimately why we came up with the idea of the philosophy around having these awesome races that add value to the community, that lift the runners, that elevate the runners. I mean, you look at some of our races that we've got coming up in the series, and you go, these are really tough races. We want to build runners to be the best that they can be, and some of that's elevation, some of that's distance, some of that's cutoff times, but we're trying to be a race company that elevates a community of runners.
Yeah. So I was joking about us being superior. I think it's more just our personal twist on how we put on races. And I think we're kind of a blend. We've talked about it before, but if you look at the community, there's kind of an old guard that grew up with the running scene. Trail running, originated probably back in the 70s. And those are the people who are like, let's grab some milk jugs, fill them with water, tape them to our hands, and we'll see you at the finish line. And at the end of it, we'll have a barbecue and hang out with our friends. That's what ultramarathon trail running is supposed to be about. And then there's like the new guard of, this is a corporate thing. We can turn this into a money-making industrial machine, and we'll have corporate sponsors, and we'll have prize money given out, right? And the old guard looks at that and says, that's not how this is supposed to be. It doesn't feel organic. It doesn't build up the community. It doesn't make people feel the same way about ultra running that it should. And so our goal is to keep as much of the old community as possible. Not physically keep the old community, but to keep that atmosphere of making people feel welcome and making people feel like these are the people that they want to be around when they do a trail race, because it's not just about the run. It's not just about finishing, and it's not about showing off your new Solomon shoes. It's about making sure that everyone finishes together, that we're building people up, that we're having a great experience. So, with that, do we have any information that we want to give out about future races. We just finished the ranch, and I think we're going to save that for a different podcast because we'd like to go in a lot of depth about the things that went right and wrong. Obviously, it was our first race that we directed exclusively by ourselves, Second Wind Trail Running. Sean, I know you've helped out a lot at other races in official and unofficial capacities, so you have an idea of what race directing is supposed to look like, but the training wheels were off for this one. And so a lot of things went right.
Well, I mean,
and
we
a
had
lot
Scott
of things.
Mills, so training
We
wheels
did
were
have Scott
completely
Mills, yeah. So we had with training wheels were off, but we had those bumpers on the sides of bowling.
Yeah, we had those bumpers on the lane.
Yeah. So I was watching that guy a couple times when we had our race, and I think we should move away from it. But there were things that I was just watching him do that I was like, if he hadn't have stepped in to do that, this problem would have just ballooned into so much bigger of a mess because we didn't realize that it was going to be a problem. And so he really came in the clutch, and it was awesome.
Yeah, totally.
So why don't we wrap up for today with just a little bit about the podcast and a little bit about what kind of content we want to bring here, what kind of things we want to talk about. This was a little bit more about us, and I mean, it was a lot about us. And it was just an introductory episode to give you some background so that you know who the people are who are talking. But it's not going to be descriptive of exactly what this podcast should be. We want to talk more about, we want to be in the ultra community, but we want to talk about races. We want to talk about people. We want to have personalities on. So tell us a little bit about what kinds of things that you want to have content-wise on here so that people know what to expect.
I interrupted a story, and if you want to check out how Bandera went and that journey that we have a YouTube channel that has the video on it. Check out Bandera 100K. It was a lot of fun. We flew in. We kicked butt. I hobbled in. You gracefully finished. Yeah, so we didn't get to finish that story, but just check out the video. It's pretty good. And then, when it comes to what this podcast is about, our goal is that we're going to elevate the community with the podcast, and we'll talk about some of our races and how we are going to move forward with them, and we'll do race recaps. We're also going to do pre-race interviews. We're going to try and sit down with some people that have signed up in our races and just have a reflection with them about the race and their experience. We're also going to be bringing in people that don't necessarily run the races, or some do, but some don't put on races, and they still add value to the community. Companies like Elevation Culture, we're hoping to get some of the people from there on here and just have them talk about the aspect that they add to the community. Because a race isn't just a race; it's a medal, it's a course, it's people that are flagging the course. It's the competitors that you compete against. It's the vendors that you bring in. It's the race directors. It's their volunteers. It's the other race directors that come in and add support to the races in the community. And so we like to get kind of that functional conglomerate, and that's one aspect, is the whole race and everything that comes around it. But we're also going to be bringing in, hopefully, to bring in people that are experts in certain different areas, like whether it comes to nutrition. I know that's hit or miss on nutrition, but we feel an exposure to a lot of different things will help you narrow in what's best for you. But also, physical trainers, medical professionals, even, maybe bringing in some of the people that like EMTs that work these races and things that you should look out for. Bring in some other people, like maybe they're not elite runners, but they're people like a John Shark who runs 10, 1500s a year, and what that kind of looks like, to put a race schedule together and the training that goes on in that, and building that endurance to run those mini miles. And then maybe just experts in the community. There are other people like an REI, and bringing REI in and having them talk about what they're going to do for, the community and the trails and things like that. So maybe some shoe companies like Milestone Running.
And since it's very tender to us right now because everything we're doing is brand new, we also wanted to do some race spotlights. I think there's some races that are already prolific that we want to kind of hit on and give our personal take on, but also any new races that are coming in the area, or any new ones that are jumping up, that are popping out and catching our attention.
Yep.
One that always stands out to me And last year was, I believe, their first running the Whistler Alpine Medal put on by Gary Robbins and crew. And I know Jamil Curry of Air Viper Running loves to put on new races, but he also loves to run inaugural 100-milers. And so he put out some videos about the Whistler Alpine Meadow 100-miler, which I think is like 170K, so just over 100 miles, 110, 108 miles or something crazy like that. But so highlighting those, but also bringing to your attention the new races that we have going on. We have not officially launched it, although we do have some registrations for it. Our next race coming up is at the end of December. It's right after Christmas. It's called Route or Running Out of Time. It's a 24-hour, 12-hour, and 5K race in the Lake Miramar area. You can go to our website, secondwindtrailrunning.com, all one word, and it's in the races tab, with the goal of having the 5K people have one last chance to get a PR before the year's out, so they can officially say that was their PR for whatever year they choose to run it. 12-hour people, hopefully shooting for 50 miles, but we also know that technically there are some people who are capable of running more than 50 miles in 12 hours. There are a few who can run 100 miles in under 12 hours, right?
There's a handful, maybe half a dozen people in the country that can run 100 miles in 12 hours.
Yeah, Zach Bitter is the only name that comes to mind, but technically can do it. So if that's a goal you want to shoot for, that you can, but we also have a much more flexible time cutoff of 24 hours to get 100 miles if you think that that's something that would entertain you. And we're going to be putting that one on at the end of 2020 this year. So look for official announcements about that. But check out the race website, and it is open for registration. We just know with COVID-19 going down and our official permitting not completely done yet, because we are not allowed to process the permitting. Yeah, it has a 6-month window, so we can't start it until June, I believe, the end of June. And so once we get that all taken care of, we'll officially let people know that the permitting is complete and that they are not going to be in danger. But we think by the end of December, races should be back in full swing, and we won't have to do that one virtually or remotely or anything crazy like that. By the way, we just heard that Western States shut down for this year because that was in June. And then I just heard that the Berlin Marathon, which was scheduled for the last weekend of September of this year, is being pushed back. So I know that's Germany, and that's a totally different frame of reference, so that doesn't have necessary bearing on what things are going to happen in California and the United States, but it is a general indicator of what could happen.
Do you know if I think that the Hard Rock was pushed back too? I'm not entirely sure on that.
I think you're right. Hard Rock or Leadville, one of the two. I don't know. I thought I read that Leadville is done for the year, but I mean that's the moneymaker for that town, so I assume that they'll figure out a way. But a lot of adapting has to happen. What's that? What's the Bay Ridge 100K? I mean, they did something pretty cool where they have this sign up where they're not sure if they'll get the permits. They put the event out there, and then they charge you after you confirm that you still want to run it. And I thought that was a really great idea. So shout out to them for doing that. We both signed up for it just because we're like, what a great idea. Yeah, Dick Collins 5 Trail. That was going to be a race that I was planning on doing at the end of September, and I was holding off because of all this stuff happening. And then they offered that. So yeah, you sign up, they have your card, but they won't charge you until they know that they have the permitting completed. And then they'll email you and say, hey, did you still want to run this race? So you're basically just reserving your spot. Yeah. Yeah. So that's a really cool idea. So something we might be able to implement for our future races, and something that now is occurring to me that we should have done for Route already.
We have one race too, which we haven't a name for, but it's a 50-miler that's in the final phases of permitting. We have a 100-miler that we have a soft yes for. That's the Sequoia 100, which will be taking place next year in September, we think. And we got some other races that we might be onboarding. We're in a process of articulating those and figuring out some details. But we're really excited to just add value, push things forward, and just make the best impact we can as individuals to a collective.
I mean, I hope that's clear in how we're coming across. You know, we got 6 races that have a lot of good momentum for being run in 2021, and then, like you said, another 5 that we're hoping to onboard. And we really just want to make sure that we're putting on a consistent and excellent race atmosphere from start to finish.
We've had some other races too, just real quick, that we have looked at where we're like, we can make this happen, and this is something we can put together, but it's not in the capacity and the quality that we intend to for all the other races. So they ended up not being something that we decided to pursue.
Yeah. So anything else you want to cap out before we call it a day here?
I'm looking forward to doing the ranch recap.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, that'll be...
There may be something fun video-wise that we will be adding to our repertoire of content that will be available at YouTube that we're fleshing out right now. So more things to come on that. Vagueness so that if we don't do it, I can bail out.
That's the MO. All right. Well, this has been fun. Look for more content. Thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks for sticking around for story time with Sean and Jaymes. And we hope you know who we are a little bit better, and I hope you know who we are as far as our heart and our desire to put this on and to make good content and across diverse platforms. Check us out. We're on YouTube. Just search for the channel SWTR. I think we're the most popular one on there.
Get out there, start running, and grind from peak to peak.
Grind from peak to peak. There you go, buddy. All right, I'll see you in the next one.